We have a wide audience here at the Office of the Prime Minister in Kingston, Jamaica, and certainly virtually a number of our partners are joining us online. May I invite everyone to stand for the playing of the national anthem of Jamaica. The Archbishop Emeritus of Kingston, for the invocation. Reverend Rees.
Let us pray. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, your word tells us from Ecclesiastes that there is time for everything. A time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to die, to born, a time to laugh and a time to mourn. And as we gather here this afternoon for this launching, we beg of you your wisdom to know exactly what the commissioners ought to be doing as they launch out on this wonderful transformation program. We ask for your wisdom, because without you we can do nothing, and in you we live and move and have our being. We beg of you now to help us as we continue doing what ought to be done for the well-being of our people, so that we can equip our people, our young people especially, for the years to come, that they will not be left behind. Bless us, therefore, as we listen to one another during this launch. Through Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Thank you so much, Archbishop Rees. And so let me begin, first of all, with the formal salutations to tell all of those who are joining us online, who are here with us today, and those who are also on virtually in this meeting. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, and in many respects, people will say, the birthday man. The Honorable Carl Samuda, the Minister of Education, Youth and Information. Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, who has joined us virtually. The Honorable Alondo Terralong, the Minister of State and the Minister of Education, Youth and Information. Excellencies, High Commissioners and Ambassadors and Heads of Missions and International Organizations joining us virtually. And later on, I will list all of those who are online with us. Senator Aubin Hill, the Executive Director of the Economic Growth Council. Mr. Peter Bunting, the Member of Parliament and Opposition Spokesman on Education. Mrs. Audrey Sewell, the Permanent Secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Dr. Grace McLean, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And we are especially honored to be joined today by Professor Orlando Patterson, Chairman of the Commission on Education Transformation, and other members of the Commission. And representatives of the media, a very good afternoon to you. As I said in my opening, this afternoon is indeed historic. It is to position Jamaica to meet the fourth industrial revolution, to position our education system to ensure that our children, the future of our great island, are properly prepared to meet that industrial revolution and certainly place Jamaica among the leaders in the world. To start us off this afternoon in terms of the conversations that we will have, and certainly points of reference in terms of the thoughts that we'll share today, may I invite the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Carl Samuda, to the lectern. Minister Samuda.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Honorable Prime Minister, a very happy birthday. Other very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, including my Minister of State, Orlando Terrelang, who was introduced, and Opposition Spokesman Peter Bunting, senators, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, but most importantly, our visitor and guest, and man of the hour today, Professor Orlando Patterson. I must say, and I decided to take the opportunity to say it, although we informally discussed it when you arrived. I felt a sense of absolute pride when, in the midst of the Floyd George matter in the United States, when you were invited on MSNBC by Lawrence Adama to put things into perspective, and you did so ably, I felt very, very proud to know that a fellow West Indian had been put in that position. Thank you very much for being who you are. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon as we launch the Jamaica Education Forum Commission, which will carry out a comprehensive review of our national public education system. The last major review of our educational system was done 16 years ago in 2004. A lot has changed in the last 16 years. The last 4 months, ladies and gentlemen, have brought about significant changes in how we engage and teach our children. Despite the challenges, COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to rethink and reassess the public education system. We are now actively implementing strategies that would have been unthinkable even 6 months ago. As I speak, we are finalizing preparations for the beginning of the 2020-21 school year. We have adopted a blended approach. So in September, our students will receive instructions both face-to-face and via distance and online teaching. The world is changing rapidly, and our educational system must also evolve if we are to properly equip our students with the real-world skills they will need not only to survive, but thrive on the local and international stage. It cannot be business as usual. As we embark on this review, we must also take great care to ensure that there is equity in the educational system. We have to ensure that all Jamaicans, regardless of their address or circumstances, have access to quality education. This must be equal opportunity for all. The Ministry welcomes the formation of this commission, which will review all sectors of the system, including early childhood, primary, secondary, vocational, and higher education. We look forward to the recommendations that will come from the Commission as we continue working to ensure Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential through world-class educational training. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. Our function here will be very brief. You will hear mostly from our presenters today. But I'm very encouraged that we all have all hands on deck to deal with education. In fact, we've heard it so many times in the classroom, we've seen it practically, and it is true that education is the #1 transformative force that any individual can experience. If you start from poverty, education can help you come out of that poverty. And I'm pleased this afternoon that we have a partnership approach with all stakeholders going forward. So may I invite this afternoon to speak with us Mr. Peter Bunting, Member of Parliament. He is the Opposition Spokesman on Education.
Thank you, Naomi. Prime Minister, colleague, parliamentarians, Professor Patterson and commissioners, good afternoon. I should say distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Any review and redesign of the education system must begin with the end in mind. What is the outcome or output that we desire? And critically, how do we measure success? Let me use a recent comment on the Michael Manley administration of the 70s to illustrate what I mean. If we use only the limited measure of GDP growth to determine the success of that 70s administration, then perhaps it will be poorly graded, as would be the case with this current administration if we only use that measure. However, if instead we use some broader measure of social transformation, of smaditization, as Professor Rex Nettleford would have said, we would come to a different conclusion. Prime Minister, the fact that you can't easily quantify the value of an awakened consciousness does mean that it is unimportant. The confidence and self-worth instilled in the children of that era facilitated many, myself included, to become successful entrepreneurs in the decades to come, even though we were not from the traditional families or ethnic minorities that had dominated business previously. So I believe to guide the strategic path forward, we need a vision statement of the desired product of a transformed education system. My task force, as opposition spokesperson, has come up with the following, and I quote, "The educated Jamaican is a lifelong learner, a productive citizen with a strong positive identity, in charge of his or her personal, economic, and social development." End quote. I commend the Prime Minister for convening this high-level Commission on Education Transformation, and the opposition supports this initiative. When it comes to education, I think all of us as politicians should focus less on the results of the next election and more on the outcome for the next generation. And that's why we don't hesitate in supporting this initiative. The inappropriateness and inadequacy of our enduring colonial-era philosophy and practice of education has long been recognized. From as far back as 2004, when Prime Minister Patterson tabled the report of the Task Force on Education Reform. It was titled A Transformed Education System. The critical thing is not just recognizing what needs to be done, it's in the execution. An analysis of the education system's effectiveness highlights the following. One, that in spite of being afforded universal access to early childhood, primary and secondary education, 70% of Jamaica's workforce has no educational or work certification, and only 15% possess tertiary level credentials, thereby rendering Jamaica a low-skill, low-wage, job-creating investment destination. Two, a significant number of the graduates from tertiary institutions end up with a skills mismatch between their knowledge and skills and the tasks for which they are needed. As a result, many of our university graduates end up working in call centers or in jobs that only require a secondary education. Third, the socializing institutions of the family, church, school, and community are failing. As a consequence, many teachers spend a great deal of their classroom time just maintaining order, And this leads to teacher frustration and stress and poor performance of students. The fourth point I think that we all agree on, or we should all be able to agree on, is that the Ministry of Education has become an over-centralized bureaucracy that is inefficient and disempowering for school leadership. I'm not pointing fingers at my friend Carl, because this is something that has been there for across administrations. The technology and infrastructure used in most classrooms are both inadequate and inappropriate. There's no other institution that you could go into today that resembles so closely what it did half a century ago as our classrooms in Jamaica. And, you know, Prime Minister, this is the first time in a few years I've had a chance to come into the media room here at OPM. And I see that, you know, your technology has stepped up quite a bit. If I'd known, I would have sent my remarks for the teleprompter. But next time, you invite me, if you invite me again. And finally, the priority for the transformation effort must start at the base, the early childhood sector. So much of our effort and our resources are going into remediating what we missed at the earlier stages. And all of the, you know, some of the most quoted studies that you have, the Perry High Scope School Study, for example, tells you that the highest return on investment in education is at that early childhood level. And what is even more interesting is that almost 90% of that return comes from the fact that children who have a high-quality preschool education are less likely to be in conflict with the law. So it really means it's about instilling values at that early age. So in conclusion, let me just point to some issues which I think are important for the way forward. Our education and training policies and strategies must be developed in the context of the forces of disruption and innovation that are shaping our future. Smart technologies, including artificial intelligence, big data, augmented reality, robotics, and the Internet of Things. These technologies are disrupting every industry across the world at unprecedented speed. Looking through this prism, it becomes obvious that our students need to be educated differently than in the past. The education system must support students to develop the skill set and mindset to do anything rather than a particular something, as we cannot anticipate what the jobs of the future will look like. Creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration skills will be valued even more than the technical skills by our employers in future. The learning environment at our schools must be modernized to use a variety of physical and digital tools. We quite frankly have wasted years trying to centrally implement a tablets in schools program. We should have been focusing instead on a complete learning management system. And if there's one silver lining, so to speak, of this COVID pandemic, is that it should accelerate the adoption of technology in the teaching and learning process. And finally, our system of post-secondary education will have to focus on lifelong education by developing shorter programs delivered throughout the working lives of individuals. The catalysts needed for this transformation to take place must be changes to our educator training and, more important, changes to policy leadership's thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bunting, for your words and interventions there. That would certainly be part of the discourse in terms of what the Commission would be doing. I did promise that I would acknowledge by name the High Commissioners who are online with us virtually. May I acknowledge Her Excellency Laurie Peters, the Canadian High Commissioner, Her Excellency Margareta Vasilevska, the Ambassador of the Delegation of the European Union, Mr. Ozan Zlemi, beg your pardon, the Resident Representative of the World Bank Group, Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones, the General Manager, Caribbean Country Department, the Inter-American Development Bank, Ms. Denise Antonio, the Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program. I name the ambassadors and heads of missions because this is really a collaborative approach. This is really where our partners are putting their hands and hearts together with Jamaica to ensure that our human capital is developed. And if I may take some liberties, even before I introduce our main speaker to give the charge and address to us all, education, I've found, doesn't always take place in the classroom, or doesn't only take place in the classroom. There's a lot to be said for education in the society. Our grandparents, who weren't as exposed and educated as we are, certainly in terms of the tools inside the classroom, have provided gems throughout our lives. And if we look at education in a more holistic way, certainly we'll know that the classroom is just one element of where we need to go. And certainly, of course, as Mr. Bunting pointed out, the way of the future is not the skills that we have now. The critical thinking, strategic thinking, that thinker certainly will be the person who is sought after in years to come. So may I encourage those with young children, the path to success is not necessarily the straight line you may think. You have to allow people, and certainly our children, to help us along the way and teach us really the skills that are coming in, but certainly we have to ensure that we give them the basics, and that certainly is to equip them with what certainly will be part of the fourth industrial revolution. I have a quote for you. In 2016, someone said in his inauguration speech, "Independent Jamaica must remove the culture of dependency from our midst. We must teach our children that there is no wealth without work and no success without sacrifice." Does anyone know who that could have been? Well, I'll tell you. He was born on this day, July 22, in 1972, our first post-independence Prime Minister. May I invite, ladies and gentlemen, to the lectern, a man who has had a passion for education, even before he was named the Minister of Education in 2007. And certainly he's carried that passion to ensure that there is certainly people development, strong skills, and has a vision for Jamaica that will take us forward. May I invite to the lectern the birthday man, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
Thank you, Naomi, for directing the order of the ceremony. Thank you, Most Reverend Archbishop Emeritus Donald Rees, for your invocation, reminding us that there is a time and place. The time is now, and the place is right here in Jamaica. Minister Samuda, I see you have met upon a comrade, an old friend, and I'm not talking now about Mr. Bunting. Senator, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, is joining us virtually. The Honorable Alando Tarilong, the Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Excellencies who are joining us virtually, thank you for joining us. Senator Aubin Hill, the Executive Director of the Economic Growth Council. Mr. Peter Bunting, the Opposition Spokesman on Education. Mrs. Audrey Sewell, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation and the Office of the Prime Minister. Dr. Grace McLean, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and the newly appointed Chairman of the Education Transformation Commission, Professor Orlando Pattison. Representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The world is going through a period of change unlike anything any of us in this room would have experienced. In response to the unprecedented and extraordinary restrictions on movement due to the pandemic, societies have had to integrate technology, particularly virtualization. Zoom is now synonymous with meetings, just as how Google became synonymous with search. You know, more than 1.5 billion students globally are engaged in remote learning today. I was just talking to Professor Pattison, and he was explaining to me that Harvard, where he teaches, that they have been doing now, since the pandemic, almost all their classes virtually. And when school resumes, they will continue to do it virtually, though they will bring in their freshmen to allow them to get the experience. And indeed, that will be the case, I suspect, for the University of the West Indies. And the Minister of Education has given us a hint as to what the new school term could look like. But this is now the new normal. This is the way things will be for a while. And this means that there will be some shift in the economic drivers of our societies. You know, when Zoom Communications was launched in it was valued rather in 2017, the valuation was for $1 billion. It was recently valued now at $73 billion. So that just gives you a sense of the economic magnitude of the shift in technological focus. Organizations from all sectors are building technical capabilities, harnessing digital technologies and evolving their business models at a pace unimaginable a month or two ago. In Jamaica, we too have leveraged technology with the development of the Jam COVID-19 app to manage our end-to-end response to the pandemic. You know, I'll tell you a story, and this is a true story. Today is my birthday, the 22nd of July, 1972 is the year I was born. I'm certain that Mr. Bunting knows the significance of that year very well. That is the year Michael Manley won the elections. In February of that year, I believe, and I was born in July. My father was elated by the victory of Michael Manley because, like you and many other Jamaicans, he felt that the message of liberation, of political empowerment, which is described in our vernacular as the Sematization of our country, that was necessary coming out of colonialism. It was necessary to shake off the colonial mindset and to see ourselves as independent people. Michael Manley said that we will walk on our 2 feet and not on our knees. I, Andrew Michael Holness, firmly believes in that. So when I was born, my father insisted on my mother that my name should be Michael. If he had his way, things may have turned out differently. But my mother insisted that my name should be Andrew, a faithful disciple. And I am here as Andrew Michael. When I heard the furor created when I did not call my godfather's name, and a man who I respect and study his work and believe still in his mission, I was taken aback and I did not respond, because it is not appropriate, and we should always, as a country, reserve a level of respect and dignity. Even if we are critical, we do so respectfully. So there are those who would want to create a difference between what I have said and the vision of Michael Manley. My father had a perspective on life. He is still a socialist. And we had raging debates about these ideologies, and that shaped my mindset. And it has indeed shaped how I have approached government. Because in everything we do, we must ensure that we strike the natural balance. And if things get to the extreme, they are usually dangerous. And I've long since come to the conclusion that there is a balance to be struck and a necessary recognition that if we are going to truly achieve our political independence, we must also achieve our economic independence. We must understand that there is no reward without work. During this period, there became a disconnection between those critical principles of success. We must also recognize that there is no success without sacrifice. And you can't disconnect these principles and expect success. So, as I stand here today launching this commission, it is not to divide the nation or to engage a debate which I believe in the minds of the average man is settled, not by who is the better debater, but what the results are and what has been said publicly and acknowledged by those who were participants at the time. So much of what I said relied not on my own understanding or my own thoughts, but what those who participated and have now had the 2020 vision of hindsight to have concluded. So let me be clear to all my friends and those otherwise that I respect and love Michael Manley, and I value his work and his contribution to making us who we are can never be devalued. And I want to therefore put that to rest. But we are now heading into a new era. And we must now be prepared to accept what it brings. So, and that was not people believe that there is no friendship in politics, that there is no civility and elegance. But we have to lead by example. And what is now required of our leaders is to be intellectually adept. You must be able to call upon them at the spur of the moment, and they must be able to explain to the public in their own words, from their hearts, because it is the truth that will set us free as a nation. So, we are now on the brink of another technological revolution. It's called the fourth industrial revolution. And that is being accelerated by the pandemic. One would have thought that the pandemic probably would have turned back civilization. What it has done is to intensify the adaptation and mainstreaming of technology. Its scale, scope, and complexity will transform the world unlike anything we have experienced before. It's important for us to reflect on the fact that when the world had moved on to the third industrial revolution, that is, so we have assembled the start of the information age. Jamaica was just starting to see the benefits from the second industrial revolution. So the truth is, Jamaica once again had missed out. So now there is a fourth industrial revolution taking place in the world. And this fourth industrial revolution is about what is called cyber physical systems. Artificial intelligence, biometrics, genome editing, renewable energy, 3D manufacturing, autonomous vehicles, presents, and the Internet of Things. To the average Jamaican, those things sound strange. But this is what will define the world. Well, it is defining the world now, and it will become mainstream in a few years. Capital required. If we wait around, once again, we will become consumers of these things. And the worry, let me explain it, is that bauxite and tourism will not be able to pay for those goods. So it means it is either we don't consume or we borrow. So if we're going to solve that problem, we must put ourselves in a position to produce. The issues of equity and social justice that is involved in that cannot in itself be ignored. Michael Manley faced the same dilemma. His focus we need to do as a government to create a world-class educational system geared towards enabling our people to fulfill their potential and develop the skills base and human capital required for Jamaica to compete successfully in the 21st century global economy. You will notice that the title of the commission contains the word transformation. What I'm looking for is not tinkering or tweaking, but real, radical change that will put Jamaica on an entirely new trajectory to growth and prosperity. The second is to ensure inclusivity. The system we build must ensure that all our children and learners have access to this world-class education system that we build. Michael Manley would want that. I'm certain Edward Seaga would want that. All of us want that. And that would complete their work if we are able to do it. If we build a world-class education system, but it is still not accessible to the ordinary Jamaican child, we would have failed. Education provides our children with the key to open the door to a better life. All our children deserve to receive the precious gift of education. We have promised it to them. It is now time to deliver. As I've always said, education is the vaccine. It is the vaccine against COVID-19, the pandemic. It is the vaccine against crime and violence. It is the vaccine against ignorance and incivility. It is the vaccine against poverty and starvation. Can you imagine if somewhere in Jamaica, a little boy or girl comes up with the next breakthrough technology? Imagine if that boy or girl develops technology similar to Zoom, which is now valued at $73 billion. That could pay off our national debt several times over. I believe I have made my case. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for those very important words that have certainly spurred the thought process and certainly will begin a new conversation in terms of how we chart the way forward in education. In fact, education and the application of education does indeed transform lives. May I now open the Zoom line for any comments or questions in particular to this matter, especially for members of the media. A comment certainly would, from the partners as well, would be welcomed. May I, though, before that, invite our chairman, Professor, and I'm very, very honored. Sir, we all read your books when we studied at university, and it is, in fact, an honor to have you here. The Prime Minister made an absolutely excellent choice in having you chair this commission. May I invite you to say a few words, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable Prime Minister, Archbishop Rees, honorable members of Parliament, distinguished guests. I'm both humbled and deeply honored to have been asked to do this task, to chair this commission. I had a long speech, but Mr. Jane kept telling me 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So and it's usually better that I don't read from my speech. I'm just going to read from some scattered notes. It is fascinating hearing all the talk with respect to Michael Manley. 1972, as mentioned repeatedly, and I feel I'm sort of completing the circle here because it was in July 1972 that I received the letter informing me that I was formerly special advisor to Michael Manley. So, if you live long enough, everything that goes round comes back round. And so it really is, when I was invited, I reflected on that, and I thought this is not only humbling, but a remarkable opportunity to perhaps attempt to complete some of the unfinished business from the 70s. And at that time, I was involved with urban planning and urban work, and we did a lot of work in South Central Kingston. But education, as the Prime Minister emphasized, and as several other speakers have emphasized, is absolutely key. All economists have now converged on this one point, that the single most important factor explaining development, explaining successful change, is education. And the signs of it, the evidence of it is all around us, but you only have to go to the East Asian countries. Singapore, with which we are often compared. Every time I speak to my friends at the School of Education, and I've been speaking to them a lot, preparing for this, they always mention when they hear Jamaica, Singapore, because we are often compared with Singapore. We're about the same size. And there was a time, believe it or not, when Jamaica was economically ahead of Singapore. Singapore is now, of course, a world-class leader. In fact, even the British are talking about becoming like Singapore, believe it or not. How did that happen? One word: education. They saw it, they emphasized it, and they were absolutely sort of almost fanatical in their commitment to it. But it's not just Singapore, it's South Korea, it's Taiwan, it's Japan in its day, and it's in every successful case we know. And so I cannot express my gratitude for having the opportunity, for being part of this process of what we hope will be a fundamental transformation of this key institution. Now, Jamaica has much to be proud of. And let me emphasize that, because I am a comparative sociologist, and I know when things are bad. And we have done a lot, in spite of our problems, which I'll get to, which we can take some pride in. We've got universal schooling at the grade and high school level. We have an excellent tertiary system with a world-class university, my alma mater, which I'm very proud. We have hard-working teachers and administrators. We have a system which is, again, thinking comparatively, remarkably free of politics. You'd be amazed what goes on in education in some countries. Consider yourselves, consider ourselves fortunate. We have here the leader of the opposition. That's not unthinkable. But again, I think comparatively, this is inconceivable in most of the countries. They're usually fighting with each other. It's a system also which has remarkably stable union politics in teaching, because again, from the comparative work I've done, one of the things that really messes up educational reforms in other countries is the role of the unions. And our unions, of course, they're very sort of active in promoting the interests of their teachers and so on. Well, the teacher union here in Jamaica, compared with other countries, and I won't call any names, behaves quite rationally. We have an exam system which is not corrupt. Again, you wouldn't believe what goes on in other countries. It's their examination system. And we have an abundance of excellent research on education. I couldn't believe it. When I was first asked, the first thing I did was to sort of check out what's available. And we have a remarkable amount of research and studies done on education. So make our life easier, although one must ask, with all this research and so on, why isn't the output better? And however, that's the good news. The question is, why haven't we done better? The Prime Minister referred to an implementation deficit. Because among the other things we have are the institutions which are necessary for educational reform. It's there. As if some of you have read my last book, I won't assume that any of you have, I've compared Jamaica with Barbados, which has an excellent educational system, which prides itself in the fact that it has a 99.89% literacy, which they like to point out is better than Britain and America. But you know something? We spend as much per capita on education as they do. What they get for it is very different from what we get for it. So what's going on? It's bad news. We have what the World Bank calls a learning crisis. That is to say, we have succeeded in placing people in school, but as the Prime Minister has pointed out, what they're learning leaves much to be desired, a learning crisis. So measured in terms of past effort, not done all that badly, but measured in terms of what needs to be done, we are way behind, and we have a crisis in many respects. We need to become competent. Still, I've heard about the different revolutions, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Well, we aren't even ready yet for the Second Industrial Revolution, and the skills essential to run a fully functioning industrial technical economy. We aren't there yet. And we certainly are not at the other revolution. Different terms have been used, and I was very happy to see how knowledgeable folks are about this. But the term I prefer to describe what is now considered essential is the knowledge economy, the 21st century knowledge economy. We are yet to achieve the basic requirements of the industrial society. That has to do with STEM, as we've discussed, technology, math, science. Because to get there, what you need as fundamental, as absolutely essential, is that your graduates have basic numeracy and literacy. And that hasn't happened. It breaks my heart reading, and I've spent the last 3 months just poring over everything I could read on the Jamaican educational system. In 2019, for those of you who haven't gone through this data, 60% of our primary school graduates, 60%, are either completely ignorant or just not proficient in math. 60%. 2019. 45% are not proficient, are simply illiterate in language arts. Can't read and write. 51% are either ignorant or lack basic proficiency in science. You see what I mean when I said we are not yet ready even for the Industrial Revolution? In the secondary school system, where we have succeeded, in bringing in a lot of people. When I went to KC many years ago in 1953, less than 2% of my age group were going to high school. Now it's substantially greater. But what we've succeeded, what they do is something else. Only 47% pass 3 subjects or less in the CSC, 10% of whom fail completely. Okay? The same has to do with CAPE. A related problem, fundamental, because it goes to a social crisis, the social crisis which our educational system will have to solve too, is the gender crisis in education. Now, Jamaica is always peculiar. I call it the confounding island for good reason. But this one I missed. In most of the developing world, when you read the UN reports, they claim there's a gender crisis. But you know what the gender crisis is? It's a lack of women. The women being left behind, the women being illiterate, the women not being sent to school, the women not competing in the exam. Our gender crisis, my friends, is the opposite. Or boys failing. I mean, it's quite remarkable. In math, I mentioned the results in the PEP, the PEP results in 2019. You want to know what the results are? 60% of the boys are failing or just not proficient. Compared with 51% of the girls. In other words, about a half of the girls are passed. It's not good, but it's much better than 66%. 2/3 of our boys are not passing math. In many cases, the boys are not even trying. Of the 32,617 kids who took the CSC exams last year, 56% of them are girls, but only 44% are boys. In the CAPE exam, it's even more extreme. 62% of those who are passing the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency exams are girls. 38% are boys. We have a gender crisis of a sort not found in the other parts of the world. And it's tied to the other crisis, the social crisis, because what happened to those boys who are dropping out? And by the way, this is not even giving you the extent of the problem, because this is for people who take the exam. This is not telling you who drops out. If you were to use another metric, which I wasn't able to get the data on, which is of those who start the secondary school system, how many finally take exams? The figure would be even more extreme. This is a basis of one of the most important bases of our social crisis. Because what happened to those boys who are dropping out? What happened to those boys who are failing? You know what happened to them. The Prime Minister's already mentioned it, as well as the opposition spokesman. So we have to face the role of education, not only in promoting the economy, which has got to be central, but equally the role of education in the cultural, moral, and social change in the country, and the crisis we face. We face a crisis. It's best reflected in the fact that we have among the highest homicide rates in the world. But that's just one index. The index has to do with something the PM said to me when we spoke a few weeks ago about the problem of civility, the problem of social interaction, the problem of just violence. Violence not just as expressed in terms of homicide, but in interactions and so on. We have a huge problem there. And this is the other issue, which has been mentioned before, the fact that education, and I'm glad to hear so many people mention it, because I spent some time in my last book, the Confounding Island, mentioning that this is going to be critical role of education, not just teaching the formal subject, which is very important, very, very important, but also in collaboration with the community and parents. We have to have a radical radical rethinking. Now, this is being done elsewhere, and I've been in consultation with experts who are seriously thinking about this, because not only Jamaica will face this problem. We face this problem in inner cities in America, face this problem all over Africa and elsewhere. Or the task I see then, and I'm not going to lay out any goals now because I'm approaching this with extreme humility. I'm assuming complete ignorance. In spite of the fact that I've spent a lot of time reading about it and I've heard all of you. But as chair of this commission, I'm going to approach this in a position of humility and ignorance, to hear from all the stakeholders what we should be doing, to hear from all the experts what we should be doing, but with the goal as laid out by the PM, the vision of transforming our educational system in a way that will bring us up into the Industrial Revolution, but also, and I was so happy to hear several people, including Mr. Bunting and the chair and the PM mentioned this, the knowledge economy, 21st century knowledge economy. So we have two revolutions we have to sort of, wage here. Getting into the industrial economy by sort of bringing our students up to scratch in basic numeracy, literacy, science, and so on. But at the same time, we have to also engineer our way through the knowledge economy, which is what? It's the term breadth skills is often referred to. And it's nothing mysterious about this, although people when they first hear it think it is. But no, what we've discovered is that the 21st century economy, or knowledge economy, information economy, you want to call it, but it's broader than information economy, is one which involved creating a student, a person, who has a new special way of thinking creatively, thinking critically, as has been mentioned, but thinking collaboratively, in learning how to think in terms of teams, having certain emotional qualities of persistence, qualities of self-regulation, qualities of personal and social competence, qualities of sort of ethical behavior and intercultural understanding. These are fundamental in the world in which we live, because it is such an unpredictable world. Look at the world we're living in now. Who would have 6 months ago anticipated that we have this crisis? But we in Jamaica know how, and the rest of the Caribbean, unpredictable the world is, partly because we're small, exposed economies. We wake up one morning and we find ourselves, the advanced world has a major economic crisis, 2008. What do? We have to have a whole new mindset in our educational systems, which can sort of adapt. We have to modernize Anansi. Now, Anansi, I grew up with him, had those skills. The world was unpredictable. The world was horrible. And you had to learn how to negotiate it, except that the way Anansi did it was through generalship and so on. A modernized Anansi is, in fact, exactly what we're talking about, learning how to respond to a rapidly changing and unpredictable environment. And by the way, this is not pie-in-the-sky thinking. A lot of countries have now adopted this in a serious way in their educational system. Australia has done that. Singapore is way ahead of everyone else on this. And they don't fool around with wishy-washy stuff. They have made this now a central part of their educational system, this new knowledge economy. Finland has done this. Ireland has done this. South Korea has done this. So this knowledge economy and this mode of thinking, since we're going to transform our educational system, let's do it too. One of the advantages of being behind is that you can catch up with what people ahead have done. already. So, transforming the system then, so that we can solve the terrible problem of lack of readiness for the STEM, for the industrial economy and the STEM knowledge. We need it unless we have that foundation of math, language, science, we're not going to make it. But also, interestingly, this knowledge economy, when you think about it, I thought this is remarkable because the skills necessary for it are also the skills that will help us solve our social crisis. Note what they are. The sort of development of personal social competence, of ethical behavior, and of intercultural understanding, and of personal understanding. Knowing those skills are exactly the skills you need to be the kind of person who doesn't violently react when they disagree. So with the very same set of skills which we need to enter the 21st century knowledge economy are exactly the kind of skills which will make us less murderous, less violent in our gender relations and in our interpersonal relations generally. This is what I see as our task, and as I said, I'm going to approach it as one who is ignorant and open entirely to the advice, the suggestions, the readings, which we're going to get from all the stakeholders we were consulting, parents, teachers, unions, politicians, the World Bank, and the other multinational organizations, which we've already had very constructive discussions with. And hopefully, at the end of this journey, we will come up with a plan, a vision, which will effectively transform this educational system, which in turn, which will be the foundation of the transformation of this society as it enters in the 21st century. I'm looking forward to this. I've put aside everything else. I've stopped writing the book I've been writing because I see this as this single most important challenge of my life. Even more important, Mr. Bunting, than the challenges I faced in the 1970s. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Patterson, what an honor it has been, really. You know, I think God has a very good sense of humor. In our communication plan here at the Office of the Prime Minister, we said to the Prime Minister that we should do almost like an OPM talk or a OPM lecture series. And this certainly has launched it nicely. In fact, I will tell you that I have gotten so many messages on my phone saying how much appreciative persons who are watching are of the perspectives that have been given by all the speakers, in particular the Prime Minister and yourself, Professor Patterson, because certainly I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that really we need to fix education, to fix the country, and those simple soft skills that we take for granted, really, those ethical matters, really, the base of them are really in education. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate it. I won't go to the part about your high school development in Jamaica and making you a great man, the great man you are, but we thank you for giving your time, certainly, to this mission. May I then invite, especially for our partners online, if they have a comment or want to just quickly ask a question, we will open the lines for maybe just about 5 minutes so that we'll be able to take your comments, certainly from the partners online. For those in media, we just want to focus certainly on this very important matter of education and the commission that we're launching today. So for those who are online, if you have any question, comment, please let us know now. I will be able to see if you have your question or comment. If not, let me just remind you of the commissioners who have certainly said that they will be giving of their time and energy here with us at the Office of the Prime Minister in terms of serving on this commission. For especially the media, let me once again say, the commission is chaired by Professor Orlando Patterson. We also have Professor Eleanor Brown, Professor David Tennant, Professor Michael Taylor, Professor Maureen Sams Vaughan, Ms. Erica Simmons, the Most Reverend Donald Rees, Professor Colin Giles, Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, Dr. Jeffrey Hall, Mr. Gordon Swaby, soon to be father as well, so I'm sure he'll take this very, very, very seriously, as he does all of his other tasks. Educator extraordinaire, Mrs. Esther Tyson, Dr. Garth Anderson, and a woman who has done a transformative job in her own right at the Nagohead Primary, Miss Floretta Plummer. Thank you all for serving. Again, I ask those online, if you wish to comment, just use the raise hand feature. If not, certainly then we will say that you had a wonderful experience in just soaking in all the presentations this afternoon in terms of the perspectives shared and certainly where we go from here. All right, I think everyone is okay. I thought Ms. Turner was about to say something. You had your hand up? Okay. Could you unmute your mic?
Hear me okay?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Thank you so much.
Okay. Fantastic. I want to say, first of all, happy birthday to the Prime Minister, but it's such a pleasure to hear Professor Patterson articulate exactly the view and what's needed. And certainly IDB has been working with the Jamaican government for decades in education, including transforming the whole inspectorate and looking at curriculum, but also trying to think through what are those skills that Jamaican children need to have for the future of work. And I think Professor Patterson nailed it. The World Economic Forum pointed out exactly those elements he described as being critical to having the kinds of skills we need. So I'm really excited about this commission, and the IDB looks forward to being a partner in this future work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Jones. We really appreciate your intervention, and certainly the Prime Minister got his birthday wish that you have given, and certainly the comments that you have given on the overall presentations here. Is there anyone else with a comment or question that we may be able to take within the few minutes that we have left? I see Ozan. I think you're trying. Could you unmute your mic for us?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Prime Minister for this initiative. It can't be more timely than this, and I want to thank him also on behalf of the World Bank for allowing us to be a partner of the Commission, and our dedication is there. We had a chance to discuss with Professor Patterson, and his points are absolutely important. Thank you for, Prime Minister, thank you for highlighting the human capital indicators that are very stark, the 12 years of going to school, but only 7 years of learning. I want to link another stark number to a point that you made on innovation. If you look at countries, and very few countries have reached high income status without an export to GDP ratio of less than 50%. Certainly not in the size and similar constellation of Jamaica. And looking at what is needed for that is absolutely skills and innovation. You need innovation and the various skills that the professor was mentioning to have the innovative new way of thinking, to create and to be able to sell, and to compete in the global market. So since the 2030 vision foresees and targets Jamaica being a high-income country, this innovation and skills agenda is of utmost importance. We need the new innovators to get us to above 50% export to GDP ratio. And it's, of course, I'm saying it very lightheartedly. It's not the only indicator, but it is a stark indicator. since there is a strong correlation between skills and innovation and the exports of a country, I wanted to highlight that. And I do agree also personally, before when I learned that I was taking on this assignment in Jamaica, I was looking at Jamaica's economy and the remarkable achievements that were made on the macro fiscal side, on the budgetary side. And I was asking myself, what is the next bottleneck? And I actually, even publicly, I think, mentioned a few times that skills and innovation is going to be the next frontier for Jamaica. And I'm very, very happy that the Prime Minister has prioritized this, and we're very happy as the World Bank to be of support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ozan Silvenley, the resident representative of the World Bank here in Jamaica. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll take one more comment if there's anyone else who would like to comment. I don't see anyone with a raised hand, but I'm seeing the mouths move a little. I think Minister Johnson-Smith, I saw you a little moving, so I'd say that yes, you would make an intervention. Minister Johnson-Smith.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and happy birthday, Prime Minister, of course. Welcome, Chairman Professor Patterson. I have to say I'm honored from afar. I wish I were there to meet you personally. And I'm not only intervening because no one else there seems to be saying Fort is forever. In fact, Naomi has avoided it, but I can't have you here, my father's daughter, and not say Fort is forever. So welcome. But I just want to say how, not only how inspiring your intervention was, but when I hear about the modernization of Anansi and the conversion, the transformation, because we all know that when Jamaican ingenuity is channeled for the good, when it is channeled to the positive, that is where we get this exponential performance internationally for our size. It is the disproportionality that we experience in yourself as Professor Cowell's chair, in so many incredibly successful Jamaicans all across the world. And I want to just also say that we not only celebrate you as a diasporan and other members of the Commission who are giving service and contributing continually and in this very significant way to Jamaica's national development. This is my ministry's link in saying that we continue to value the incredible human resource capacity that we have overseas in persons such as yourself, Professor Brown, and others. And we look forward to seeing the results of this commission and in the shortest order, because it is indeed the next frontier for us. It is indeed the gap between where we are and the potential to be what we can be. Education is that frontier. So again, it was an absolute pleasure listening to your intervention. I welcome you once more, and I hope to meet you in person one day. Thank you again. And thank you, Naomi, for allowing me in. Congrats, Prime Minister, on the composition as well of the commission. You seem to have found the incredible sweet spot in age balance, gender balance, and experience balance. So well done with that, sir. Look very much forward to the results to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. In cricketing terms, you would say that he hit this one for 6. So that's very good. Thank you so much. And so the time being well spent and the afternoon going into evening being filled with knowledge and certainly food for thought, may I then invite the Prime Minister to just wrap up and certainly give the final charge to the Commission as we close this afternoon. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. It's unusual that the guest speaker has the vote of thanks. So in that regard, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing the Commission's report sometime around March next year. Thank you.